She's 3 years old, Colleen. Get your damn hands off her before this turns into a police report titled, HOA Karen strangled my niece at the pool. Her grip didn't loosen. Colleen Mirth, president of the Sandbar Palms HOA, had both fists clenched around the vest straps on Mayela's chest. My niece's face was wet, red, her mouth open in a soundless gasp as she dangled half out of the shallow end water. The float vest, USCG approved and pediatrician ordered, cut into her shoulders as Colleen yanked her upward like a bag of groceries. She didn't scream, she couldn't. I told you already, Colleen said without blinking. Unregulated flotation devices are a hazard to all residents, especially when parents fail to supervise their children. Wrong on every count. And she knew it. I stepped forward from under the cabana shade and said, low and cold, touch her again, and I will open a criminal case under child endangerment with physical restraint. That's 5 years minimum if it sticks. Colleen smiled, infuriatingly calm. Then go ahead and file your little report, Mr. Vice. So, I did what she never expected. I reached back, unclipped my department badge, and let it hang from my hand, just long enough to catch the sun and throw a glare across her face. I don't file reports, I said. I write the policies they follow. If you've ever watched an HOA cross the line and wondered who would finally hold them accountable, you're going to want to subscribe right now. This isn't even close to over. She let go. Mayela crumpled back into the pool with a splash, coughing, arms flailing for something familiar. I scooped her out in 2 strides, wrapped her dripping body in the coral whale towel, the one my sister sewed for her on her 2nd birthday. Her tiny fingers clenched the fabric like it was the only solid thing left in her world. I turned my back to Colleen, not because I was finished, but because I wasn't. My name is Chief Moreland Vice. I run enforcement coordination and interagency oversight for the entire eastern division of our county. But what matters more is that I am Mayela's legal guardian and her godfather. She's all I have left of my sister. And this? This wasn't about floaties. It never was. We moved to Sandbar Palms because it promised structure, safety, security. No noise complaints, no short-term rentals, no loopholes. The gates were high. The bylaws were strict. That brochure was the only thing Mayela smiled at when we left our last city. She pointed at the photo of the pool and said, Mama liked the blue part? Colleen Mirth saw that same brochure and turned it into a weapon. Within 1 week of us moving in, she sent a violation for visually disruptive swimwear. Then she banned all kids under 5 from the community center for acoustic safety. Then she temporarily disabled the toddler play cameras for routine maintenance 3 times. I documented everything. I waited. I tried to play by the rules. I filed polite objections. I attended the meetings. I even replaced Mayela's vest with the ugly tan one Colleen recommended. It gave her a rash. So we went back to the one that worked. And now my niece was nearly unconscious in my arms, while the woman responsible for her trauma stood 5 feet away, arms folded, pretending to enforce code. Behind her, 3 neighbors sat still in lounge chairs, phones in their hands but cameras not recording. One mother turned her child's stroller to face the opposite direction. That was when I knew. Colleen didn't just intimidate people, she trained them. You assaulted a child in front of witnesses, I said. You tampered with security footage, and you cited an illegal policy that was never ratified. Watch your tone, Mr. Vice, she said, brushing imaginary lint from her blazer. You'll find that board authority doesn't override child protection law. She froze. I saw it, the sliver of panic behind the practiced smile, because for the first time, she realized she hadn't picked just another tired parent to bully into silence. She picked the one person in this entire county who writes the procedures that decide whether or not her HOA exists next month. She picked wrong. The next morning, there was a violation slip taped to my door. Formal notice, reckless supervision at community pool, Class B violation, fine, $250. It was printed on the same HOA template they used for overgrown grass and dog poop. I held it in my hand for a second, not because I didn't know what to do with it, but because part of me still couldn't believe it. My niece nearly lost consciousness from blunt force compression, and their response was a fine. No apology, no emergency meeting, not even a phone call. Mayella was inside watching cartoons. Her voice was still hoarse. She didn't want to go outside. That was new. I folded the paper in half and slid it into the folder I'd started months ago, full of incident reports, meeting transcripts, correspondence logs, and those HOA bulletins no one reads but everyone fears. Sandbar palms looked perfect from the outside. Perfect sidewalks, perfect trash hours, perfect hedges trimmed to exactly 38 inches. The board had 4 members, 3 of whom were rarely seen outside meetings. And then there was Colleen Mirth, always visible, always armed with some clause or policy she'd twisted into a leash. At the board meeting last quarter, she bragged about redefining the community's behavioral tone. That was after she tried to force a mother of twins to remove her stroller from the community garden because it was an unsanctioned wheeled obstruction. I sat through that meeting. I watched as everyone nodded, but no one spoke. People didn't fight back here, not because they didn't care, but because they'd been trained out of it. Every time someone objected, Colleen pulled up an infraction they'd forgotten about, an overdue form, an unpainted fence post, an incorrect garden flag. The fines didn't bankrupt people, but they made them cautious, paranoid, quiet. That's how she kept control. By the time I walked Mayella to the mailbox that afternoon, 2 neighbors had already passed by and said nothing. One woman nodded at the coral whale towel wrapped around Mayella's shoulders, but looked away when our eyes met. The silence wasn't new, but this time it felt like something sharp brushing against skin. There was another bulletin in the mailbox. Amended code update, effective immediately. All children under age 5 must be accompanied in the water by a guardian at all times. Physical guidance and correction by board officers is permitted when child behavior endangers others. It was signed by Colleen Mirth. The date? Backdated 3 weeks. I stared at the paper so long, Mayella had to tug on my hand. This rule, I muttered, folding it into quarters without taking my eyes off the ink, isn't just illegal, it's a setup. I knew what Colleen was doing. She was rewriting the timeline. She wanted to make it look like her assault wasn't an impulsive act. It was enforcement, precedent, a rule no one read, but she forgot something. She forgot I see every HOA amendment the moment it's filed with the city. Not the residents, me. The system that routes policy changes through the enforcement pipeline has one final inbox before approval. Mine. And no such update had ever come through. That made it worse. She wasn't just lying. She was forging. Later that evening, I sat at the dining table, flipping through the last 6 months of HOA notices. The language pattern changed subtly in the last 3. More passive phrasing, more indirect authority, like she was insulating herself. She was preparing for something, expanding her reach maybe, testing what she could get away with, and she just crossed the wrong line. But I couldn't just kick the door in, not yet. I had to show intent, a pattern, a trail. One violation wasn't enough to trigger municipal override. I needed her whole game board exposed. I needed evidence that what happened to Mayella wasn't an accident or a one-time breach. I needed proof that she'd done this before. And that's when I remembered something odd from last fall's safety committee meeting. Colleen had mentioned a child guidance clause that the board declined to publish publicly due to formatting delays. At the time, no one questioned it. But that clause, I had a feeling it wasn't buried by accident. It was hidden for a reason. I didn't see Derek Tile at the pool that day, but I knew he'd been there. He always was. If you looked at the maintenance schedules for the last 8 months, his name showed up on nearly every pool rotation. Leak checks, filter replacements, lane divider adjustments, chlorine logs. He was the HOA's favorite kind of contractor, quiet, local, and dependent. He also happened to be the only other person besides me with authorized access to the pool's rear security panel, and I needed to know why the cameras were down. The equipment shed sat behind the tennis courts, wedged into a corner of the community layout where most residents never went. It smelled like copper and damp concrete. I found Derek standing over a bucket of maintenance tags, sorting them by date, humming a tune too low to catch. "You see the bulletin yesterday?" I asked. He didn't flinch, didn't turn around. "I don't usually read them." "Funny, your initials were on the sign-off at the bottom." He turned then, slowly. His face had the resigned calm of a man who didn't want trouble but had long ago accepted that it would come anyway. "They add my name when it's maintenance adjacent," he said. I don't write what they publish. I took a slow step closer. Were you working Tuesday morning? Around 10 new? He nodded once. Pool chemical levels. Board wanted them logged daily this month. Did you see what happened? His mouth twitched, half hesitation, half guilt. I saw movement, heard raised voices. I stayed back. You heard a child being choked, Derek. I heard something, he said carefully. Didn't see it clearly. I was behind the pump housing. That was a lie. The pump housing had a direct line of sight to the shallow end. You couldn't miss it if you tried. But I understood what he wasn't saying. Colleen's grip on this place wasn't just political, it was financial. Derek's company had the HOA landscaping contract, the pool contract, and a side stipend for emergency plumbing calls. His work wasn't protected by a union or shielded by city enforcement. It was month to month, subject to performance review by the same board that had just passed a retroactive child handling clause. Speaking out wouldn't just get him fired. It'd get him blacklisted from every HOA in a 20-mile radius. Still, he didn't walk away. Why were the cameras down? I asked. He opened a side drawer and pulled out a maintenance log, flipping to a highlighted line. Said it was for a sunlight calibration test. Timer blackout from 9:45 to 11 so. Admin override required to disable. I scanned the page. His handwriting stopped 2 lines before that entry. You didn't enter that. No, he said. I didn't. I let the silence settle between us. Derek wasn't a bad man, but he was stuck, caught between the woman signing his paychecks and the man holding a badge with more reach than most local courts. She's done it before, hasn't she? I asked. Gone too far with a kid? His jaw clenched. That's not something I can comment on. You don't have to, I said, but sooner or later, this is going to court, and if Maella's case isn't enough, they're going to start pulling. Every pool report with your signature on it. His eyes lifted to mine then, tired, cornered. I didn't press further, just turned and stepped out into the heat. I left the door open behind me, just wide enough to let the air drift in and the decision hang there. As I crossed the tennis courts, my phone buzzed. An alert from Tess Ruhlman, resident of Lot 9, notorious for oversharing on the community forum. Her message was short. Hey, I think I caught something on my ring cam yesterday. Didn't realize Maella was involved. Want me to send? I stared at it. A different angle. A second source. That could change everything. I typed back one word. Yes. Then I looked back toward the shed. Derek hadn't moved. But I saw the logbook sitting open on the workbench. Still turned to the wrong entry. Still waiting. The ring footage arrived that evening. Tess had captured it unintentionally. Her front camera pointed just wide enough to catch the edge of the pool gate and the shallow end entry. It didn't show everything, but it showed enough. Colleen's arm jerking upward, Maella's body lifting out of the water. No adult in sight within a legal supervisory distance. The worst part wasn't the image, it was the sound. A single dry gasp, like someone who hadn't learned to scream yet. I watched it 5 times. By the 6th, my hands weren't shaking anymore. They were still, cold, focused. I clipped the footage, cataloged the timestamp, and saved 2 backup copies, one local, one cloud. Then I sent a text to an old contact in municipal licensing. Need clarification on community safety amendment backdating. Silent audit. Priority flag. I didn't include details. I didn't need to. We'd worked together during a water contamination case 2 years ago, and he owed me for shutting down a corrupt vendor that nearly buried his department in lawsuits. 30 minutes later, he replied. Confirmed. No such amendment filed from Sandbar Palms in last 60 days. No quorum met. No ratified code under 3.4b, which meant what Colleen posted to the bulletin board and mailed to all residents was an unfiled, unratified policy, not just an overreach, a forgery. Still, I needed more than a policy gap to make this stick with the city. If this went to outside authorities, they'd want pattern, precedent, and provable impact. And Colleen had been smart until now, never writing what she did, never doing what could be recorded. But something had changed. She wasn't just controlling anymore. She was escalating, and that meant she was either scared or planning something bigger. At 2:11 a.m., I received a system alert from the HOA's resident portal. I'd configured a shadow login months ago, part of a quiet oversight loop the board never revoked when I moved in. They didn't know it was still active. Colleen had uploaded a new draft policy packet titled Resident Conduct Protocols Emergency Addendum. It contained a section allowing temporary physical restraint by board officials in perceived danger zones when children under the age of 5 are non-compliant with verbal redirection. There was no lawyer's signature, no ratification, no quorum timestamp. It was pre-crime paperwork. She was building justification after the fact, paper armor for a war she already started. I printed the packet and marked every line that referenced non-compliant behavior. It was a term used in special education law, not HOA policy. It had no place in a pool rulebook. At dawn, I sat on the porch with Mayela still asleep inside and began writing my report. Not for the HOA, not even for the residents, for the agencies that still remembered why they were created in the first place. At 8:03 a.m., I received a knock. The envelope on my welcome mat was hand-delivered, a yellow triangle on the upper left. Urgent enforcement notice. Inside, a second violation, this one for non-compliant behavior by guardian, and failure to submit child swimwear documentation. It wasn't about the float vest anymore. It never was. They were baiting me, pushing, trying to provoke a mistake. I walked to the end of the driveway, pulled open the community notice board, and posted a single sheet under the morning's gardening schedule. To residents of Sandbar Palms, HOA Code 3.4b has not been ratified. You are not required to comply with non-legal mandates. If you or your child has been subject to unauthorized enforcement or physical contact by a board member, please submit a confidential incident summary to email redacted. Do not sign anything without review. You are not alone. Then I locked the board again, walked home, and waited. I didn't have to wait long. At 10:27 a.m., the first reply hit my inbox. She grabbed my son by the wrist last year, told him to walk with authority or leave the water. He was 4. By noon, there were 7, and one of them came with a photo. The photo was grainy, taken on an old phone, but the timestamp made it impossible to ignore. It showed Colleen standing at the edge of the pool, one arm outstretched, gripping a small boy by the wrist. His floaty was half off, twisted, like he'd been pulled sideways. The boy's face was turned away, mid-cry. The date in the corner read 8:03, 11:17 a.m. That was nearly 7 months ago. The email it came with was short, just a few lines from a resident named Eliza Kern from Lot 22. She wrote that her son had been disciplined by Colleen during a pool safety sweep. She said she didn't report it because they were new to the neighborhood and had already received 3 citations in their first month, 1 for an unapproved sandbox toy, and 2 for unregistered guest children. She ended the message with, "I thought maybe I was overreacting, until now." I didn't respond right away. I forwarded the photo to a secure drive, tagged it with the other submissions, and kept reading. The 6th email in the audit chain was different. It didn't include a complaint. It was a tip from an anonymous address. Ask your friend Derek about the 3.7b override code on the camera blackout. He didn't disable the system. He covered for someone who did. I stared at the screen for a long time, then opened the HOA technical manual. Section 3.7b wasn't public, but I'd pulled it months ago when I was studying their surveillance loopholes. It referenced administrative overrides to the pool camera server, a manual switch that bypassed regular schedules and required dual authentication. If Derek didn't flip that blackout, then someone else did, and he knew. I grabbed the printouts and the violation notices and left the house without saying a word. Mayela was still asleep, curled around the coral whale like it was a living thing. I locked the door behind me. This time, I didn't go to the equipment shed. I went to Derek's home. Lot 6 was at the end of a cul-de-sac lined with identical palm trees and flagstone planters. His truck was in the driveway, half loaded with pool skimmers and pressure gauges. I knocked, once, then twice. He answered wearing the same sun-faded polo he always wore on maintenance days. He looked tired. "I need to ask you something," I said, "and I need the truth." He didn't speak, but he stepped aside. I followed him in. The living room was modest. A photo on the wall showed him with 2 young boys, twins, maybe 7 years old. One was missing a front tooth, mid-laugh. "I'm not going to ruin your life," I said, setting the folder on the coffee table. but you need to decide whose side of this you're standing on. He sat down slowly, hands clasped. The blackout code, I said. 3.7b. You didn't activate it. No, he said after a long pause. I didn't. Who did? His eyes flicked to the side. Colleen doesn't know how to access it directly, he said. She made her son do it, Theo. He's 19, helps with IT sometimes. She tells him it's just compliance maintenance. And you covered for him. I logged the action under my ID, told her I'd do it if she needed a blackout window. I nodded. And you knew what she was planning? I didn't know she'd grab the kid, he said. I thought she just didn't want parents recording her again. Someone posted about her on the neighborhood app last year. She lost it. I opened the folder and slid the photo across the table. His breath caught. Eliza's son, he said. She never came forward, too scared. He nodded slowly, rubbing his jaw. There are others. I need you to help me find them. I could lose everything. You'll lose more if you stay silent. He looked at the photo again, then at the one on his wall. I'll get you the maintenance logs, he said. And I have something else, my backup drive. It copies the camera server daily. Colleen thinks it only stores to the board's cloud. But I kept a mirror. I stared at him. You still have it? It's at the office. I'll bring it tonight. I stood. Thank you. He didn't reply, but this time he didn't look away either. I spent the afternoon cleaning the coral whale. The vinyl was still scuffed from the last pool day. One eye scratched into a permanent squint, but it held air. Maela refused to wear anything else now, even while dry. She sat beside me in the garage, humming to herself as I used a soft rag and mild soap on the faded tail fin. She didn't ask questions. She didn't mention Colleen. But she hadn't gone near the water since. That silence told me everything. When she went inside for a nap, I opened my laptop and pulled up the private report template from the county's Child Protective Services interface. I had access through interagency permissions, not to file reports myself, but to flag jurisdictional overlaps. What I wrote here would trigger a full audit if it crossed the harm threshold. I hesitated only once, because once this went in, I couldn't walk it back. I attached the following: Tessa's ring footage, Eliza's photo, the anonymous tip about 3.7b, and a screenshot of the backdated bulletin Colleen posted. I outlined the timeline of Maela's assault, noted my prior complaints to the HOA, and flagged the retaliatory violations I'd received in less than 24 hours. Under known risk to other children, I included anonymized excerpts from 5 other emails that had come in since yesterday. Then I hit submit. At 6:12 p.m., I received confirmation. CPS incident file, Yaraba 4296. Yara staff, pending intake review. Assigned to investigator Monica Laryl. Field status, urgent. That single word, urgent, shifted the air around me. I wasn't alone anymore. At 7:04 p.m., Derek texted, "Got the drive, coming over in 10, don't tell anyone I'm doing this." I met him in the side yard, away from the porch light. He handed me a thumb drive wrapped in a cloth napkin, like it might still burn him if he touched it too long. "It's synced through Tuesday. After that, nothing," he said. I didn't have time to decrypt the system logs, but the footage folders are clean, labeled by date. I nodded, not saying much. He didn't want to thank you. He wanted to disappear again. As he turned to leave, I stopped him. "She's going to know," I said. "When this goes public, she'll know someone gave it to me." "I know," he said. "I just want my kids to be able to swim without looking over their shoulders." Then he was gone. I waited until Maela was asleep before I opened the drive. I wasn't sure what I'd find. Maybe nothing. Maybe just static and blurred snapshots. The footage files were simple, MP4s sorted by zone and timestamp. But on Tuesday at 10:03 a.m., under Zone 1 pool entry, I found it. Colleen. Both hands on Maela's vest. Lifting, turning, not guiding her, not steadying her. Yanking her by the straps in a motion that pulled Maela's upper body from the water like a puppet on strings. My niece flailed, legs kicking, arms trying to grab something. You could see the weight of her body collapse into Colleen's wrists. And then Colleen held her there. 4 seconds, 5. Maela's head jerked back. Her lips opened. Then the shadow of my body entered the frame. And Colleen dropped her. I watched it in silence. Then again. and again. I'd seen a lot of things in my career: car wrecks, domestic violence, panic calls that ended in blood and broken glass. But this hit lower, because it wasn't a mistake. It wasn't panic. It was control. Colleen wanted Maela to be afraid, not drowned, not bruised, afraid. The kind of fear that teaches a child to sit still, stop talking, and obey. The kind of fear that trains parents to look the other way. I burned the footage onto 2 encrypted flash drives and uploaded a copy to my secure cloud. Then I set an auto-schedule to send it to the CPS investigator if anything happened to me before 9:00 a.m. tomorrow. It was insurance, because I wasn't going to let this be another whisper behind a closed gate. Tomorrow, I'd take the evidence to the city's HOA enforcement liaison, but tonight, I sat in the dark beside Maela's door, coral whale in my lap, and let the weight of what I'd seen settle into my spine. There would be no more warnings, no more polite objections, no more waiting for permission. Derek came back the next morning before sunrise. He didn't knock, just texted once. "Check your porch." I found a second envelope tucked under the doormat. No name, just a folded set of stapled papers. Inside were 6 pages of maintenance logs. Each page was dated, initialed by Derek, and cross-referenced with times when the pool surveillance system was manually disabled. The first entry, nearly a year ago. The last one, the morning Colleen strangled Maela. Derek's handwriting was meticulous. He'd recorded every override request. But more importantly, he'd circled 3 entries that he hadn't signed. Different ink, no initials, no digital trail. Fake logs. He'd been building his own audit without telling anyone, probably in case it ever came back on him. This was more than just backup. It was a confession, quiet, coded, and brave. I scanned the pages, labeled them, and added them to the CPS folder. I also submitted a copy to the city's licensing oversight office with a formal request for a board conduct review under HOA Safety Clause 42.7. It was the bureaucratic equivalent of pulling a fire alarm, and I'd only ever filed one other in my career. It triggered a 72-hour countdown. After that, a municipal review officer would be legally required to visit Sandbar Palms and begin an inquiry. If they found cause, the HOA board could be suspended under emergency code, all operations frozen, all decisions invalidated. But that wouldn't matter unless I exposed the pattern. It had to be public. I sent a message to every resident who had replied to my anonymous post. Board hearing scheduled Friday. If you've witnessed or experienced unauthorized contact, your presence matters. You will not be alone. Some left me on red. A few replied. One message stopped me cold. She slammed the gate on my daughter's walker, said it was an obstruction, broke the front wheel. I paid to replace it myself. There was no timestamp, no name attached, but I could still see the gate, still hear the echo of the word obstruction in Colleen's voice. I knew exactly what kind of woman she was, the kind that didn't yell, the kind that whispered rules and wrote new ones when her power slipped. And people let her do it because she made it feel easier than the alternative, until now. I printed everything and prepped it for presentation. Photos, logs, footage stills, contact reports. Then I reached for the coral whale again. Maela was in the living room, playing with her magnetic tiles in the shape of a castle. She looked up when she saw it. "I fixed it," I said. She didn't smile. She walked over, placed her hand on the whale's back, and nodded. Then she went back to her castle. I carried the float out to the car, settled it in the passenger seat like a silent witness. Because that's what it had become. At 2:40 p.m., I arrived at the HOA administrative office. The room was empty, except for one staffer behind the front desk, a young man who didn't bother looking up from his monitor. "Here for Friday's board review?" he asked flatly. "I'm the one who requested it," I said. He blinked, then straightened. "You're Chief Vice?" "Still am." He opened a side drawer, retrieved a folder with the city's seal already stamped on the front. "This came through an hour ago, official scheduling confirmation." I flipped it open. It was real. The board review was locked. Friday morning, 9:00 a.m., and Colleen would be required to attend in person, which meant she couldn't spin it in secret, couldn't bury it under amendments or defer to policy. Not this time. I thanked the staffer and left. As I walked back to the car, I passed the main bulletin board near the clubhouse. A new sheet had been posted. Community pool closed for maintenance until further notice. Sandbar Palms. Or HOA. She was running scared, shutting down the scene of the crime, but it was too late. The coral whale sat beside me like a promise, and on Friday, I'd bring it with me. Not just to make a point, to make sure every parent in that room remembered who the rules were supposed to protect. I didn't sleep the night before the hearing, not because I was nervous, but because I was assembling something Colleen Mirth couldn't talk her way around. Not a statement, not an accusation, a counter-strike. I started with the digital archive. I laid out Derek's mirror footage, each clip time-stamped and matched against blackout log entries. The visual trail showed a clear pattern, camera blackouts lined up with every incident involving a minor. 3 kids, 3 different weeks, 3 moments when the footage should have shown the truth, and didn't, until now. Then I layered the community complaints, anonymous reports, screenshot timestamps, photographic proof of her edits to signage, a full folder labeled 3.4b fabrication with every legal code she'd cited and every place she'd violated it. I wasn't just going to prove she'd broken the law, I was going to prove she built her power on lies, fear, and manufactured silence. At 7 a.m., I got dressed in my department blues. Not because I had to, but because I wanted her to see who she'd tried to bluff. By 8:00, Mayela was awake and sitting at the table with her cereal, still wearing her coral whale vest. I didn't ask her to. I didn't need to. She watched me zip the last folder into my briefcase, then asked quietly, "Are you going to the lady's house?" "Not her house," I said. "Her meeting." "Will she be there?" "Yes." "Are you bringing the whale?" I nodded. She didn't say anything else, just nodded back, satisfied. I arrived at the HOA Community Hall at 8:44 a.m. The lot was already full. That was my first sign something had changed. Residents who never showed for anything were here early, standing in small, tight groups. No one was laughing. A few made eye contact with me as I passed. Some nodded. One older man gave me a slow, deliberate thumbs up. Inside, the air was heavy. Not with heat, but anticipation. Colleen wasn't there yet. The other board members sat on the dais, avoiding eye contact. They looked uneasy, not defensive, just rattled. At 8:56, she arrived, perfectly punctual, polished, clipboard in hand. She didn't look at me as she walked in. Didn't have to. She took her seat, placed her notes in front of her, and cleared her throat like she was about to recite an agenda from memory. But the city's enforcement officer spoke first. Today's meeting is a public review of conduct related to recent child safety concerns at the Sandbar Palms community pool. This is not a trial, but findings may be referred for municipal or civil escalation. Mr. Vice, you submitted the request. You may begin. I stood, opened my case, and placed the coral whale on the table in front of me. Then I pulled out the folder labeled Witness Footage A, and I hit play. Tessa's ring footage filled the projector screen. Mayela's body lifted from the pool, Colleen's hands closed tight on the vest. No sound in the room, not even a cough. When the clip ended, I said nothing. Just moved to Witness B, Eliza's photo, then System Log C, Derek's entries highlighted in 2 colors, his entries and hers. Then I opened the final drive, the mirror footage, the real record of what happened when she thought no one could see. By the time the final clip played, Colleen's hands were still folded, but her knuckles were white. I turned to the room. To date, no less than 9 families have submitted formal statements describing physical overreach by a single member of this board. 5 of those involved children under 5. 3 were medically confirmed to have been injured. None were reported to CPS. I paused. She didn't enforce rules. She wrote them after the fact to justify abuse. And finally, she's not just unfit for office. She's a legal liability to every resident in this room. Colleen opened her mouth, finally, but the enforcement officer raised a hand. "No response at this time, Mrs. Mirth." He turned to the board. "I'll be issuing a temporary cease authority order while we complete the review." And just like that, the coral whale became more than a float toy. It became evidence. Colleen didn't speak after the cease authority order was read. She didn't argue. She didn't slam her clipboard or demand a recess. She just sat there, spine locked straight, lips pressed into a single flat line, like the last piece of control she had left, was silence. For once, her weaponized words failed her. The board didn't even look at her. I stayed behind after the hearing adjourned. Most residents filtered out quietly, murmuring to each other, glancing back like they weren't sure what they'd just witnessed. A few came up to shake my hand. Others said nothing at all, just placed small notes on the table where the coral whales still sat, then left. By the time the room cleared, I had a stack of 6 new written statements, all signed, all dated. I slid them into the evidence folder and zipped it shut. Outside, the air smelled like sun-baked concrete and salt. The pool was just beyond the community center, surrounded by locked gates and posted closure signs. Colleen hadn't been bluffing. She'd shut the entire place down after the CPS flag went through. But today, for the first time in months, that gate belonged to no one. At 2:14 p.m., my phone buzzed with an encrypted message from CPS. Witness log validated, video evidence confirmed, emergency field report complete. Colleen Mirth to be contacted within 48 hours. Another message came through just after it, from the City Enforcement Office. Due to confirmed policy fraud and unsafe community governance, Sandbar Palms HOA Board is under interim administration. Voting privileges suspended pending audit. It was official. The board was frozen. The rules, Colleen's rules, were no longer enforceable. By 3 p.m., I was at City Hall, submitting the coral whale and all digital backups into the chain of custody. The intake officer scanned the items into evidence like they were pieces of a burglary case. She asked if I needed protection. I said no. I knew Colleen. She didn't make direct threats. She made calls, wrote memos, whispered codes into HOA forums and let the penalties speak for her. But she'd lost the room. And more importantly, she'd lost the paper shield she built around herself. By 4:30, I was home. Maela met me at the door holding her castle of magnetic tiles. "Did she go to jail?" she asked. "Not yet," I said. "But she's not allowed to make any more rules." Maela considered that, like it was a concept bigger than her years, then nodded once and turned back to her castle. I sat on the porch with a glass of water and watched the sun start to fade behind the stucco roofs of Sandbar Palms. The street was quieter than usual, but not with tension, with ease. No patrol car rolled by. No clipboard carriers walked the curbs. No citations tucked under windshield wipers. Just kids on scooters and a father walking his retriever, both without leashes. And for the first time since we'd moved in, no one looked over their shoulder. That night, I got a call from someone I didn't expect. Derek. "I need to tell you something," he said. I closed the laptop. "Go ahead." "The board's insurance policy. It only covers incidents that follow ratified HOA protocol. Anything outside of that?" He paused. "It's direct personal liability." Meaning? Meaning every incident she covered with a fake policy? Every family that files a civil suit now? Colleen's the one who pays. I sat back in my chair. "You're sure?" "I read the whole contract tonight," he said. Clause 14.5. Liability exclusions in cases of policy fraud or administrative abuse. He hesitated. "I think this thing's going to unravel fast." It already was, and now it wouldn't stop. We hung up without saying much else. I went to check on Maela one last time before bed. She was curled up in the corner of her bed, coral whale under her arm like a pillow, breathing steady, no flinches, no muttering, just sleep. I watched her for a moment longer than I needed to. Then I stepped out and locked the door behind me. Not because I was afraid someone might come in, but because I wasn't letting anything take her peace away again. Not in this house, not on this street, not under my watch. The next morning, my phone lit up with a string of alerts before sunrise. The city's official website had posted the interim HOA administration notice publicly. Sandbar Palms was now under municipal oversight, and the board's powers were formally suspended pending a full audit. What that meant in practical terms: no new fines, no enforcement patrols, and no closed-door meetings. Residents had already begun circulating screenshots. Someone even printed out a copy and taped it to the pool gate in bold red letters. But that wasn't the real shift. The real shift came 2 hours later when I got a message from CPS. Notice of pending formal interview with Colleen Mirth scheduled for tomorrow, 9 a.m. Statement request for guardian of minor identified in footage, Niger 42A. I reread the line 3 times. She was being formally questioned. That meant criminal exposure, child endangerment, possibly reckless assault. And the fact that the footage had already been labeled and filed meant the investigators weren't stalling. They were moving, quietly, quickly, and under full state authority. By 9 a.m., I was back at the community center, not as a guest, as the one organizing what came next. With the board suspended, the city had granted temporary organizing rights to a 3-person resident transition team. They asked me to chair the first session. I declined the title but agreed to lead the review. I didn't want power, I just wanted accountability. By 9:10, a crowd of over 30 residents had filled the folding chairs, all arranged in a wide horseshoe. The coral whale sat on a small table in the center. It wasn't decoration, it was a reminder. Before we begin, I said, we're going to set one thing straight. The rules that govern this place, rules that led to fear, silence, and in some cases, harm, are suspended. Not just by policy, but by the will of this community. And what replaces them will reflect us, not her. No one asked who her was. We started the meeting with open floor time. One by one, parents and elderly residents and even a few teenagers spoke about what they had endured: gate restrictions, verbal intimidation, manipulated violations, poolside humiliation. Eliza Kern spoke, hands trembling as she held up the photo of her son. He didn't swim for 5 months after that, she said, and I told myself it was my fault for not watching him more closely. That's what she made me believe. Her voice cracked. No one looked away. Then someone else stood up. She told me I couldn't bring my nephew to the holiday event because he wasn't blood-related. She fined me for leaving sidewalk chalk drawings too long. She told my daughter not to wear distracting colors to the pool. The stories came like a flood. When they were finished, I passed around a blank sign-up sheet. If you want to be part of the permanent oversight committee we're submitting to the city, write your name here. No experience required, just a willingness to speak when others don't. The paper came back to me with every line filled. By noon, we had a preliminary draft of new rules, simple ones. No policies without resident majority vote. No surveillance changes without public notice. No fines without a grace period, and absolutely no physical contact by any board member with any resident ever, under any circumstance. I typed them up and sent them straight to the municipal oversight liaison, but I saved a copy for someone else. At 4:22 p.m., I received an unmarked envelope at my doorstep. Inside was a short letter, written in tight, shaky cursive. You've ruined everything I built here. I hope you're proud. CM. I folded it once, dropped it in the trash. I didn't need her permission to rebuild. That evening, I returned to the pool gate. The closure sign had started to peel at the corners. I peeled the whole thing off and stuffed it in my bag. Then I unlocked the gate with the emergency key provided by the city-appointed administrator and walked through. The sun hit the water just right, calm and quiet. The coral whale floated in my arms, light as air. My Ella would swim again, not today, but soon. And this time, she'd know the water was hers. The hallway outside the city's Division of Protective Services was painted in the same gray-blue as the juvenile wing of the courthouse. Neutral, sterile, intentional. The kind of color that tries not to feel like anything, so the people walking through it can pretend they're not carrying everything. I sat in the waiting area outside Conference Room 2B with a sealed folder in my lap. Inside, timestamps, signatures, 2 USB drives, and a printed copy of every verified complaint submitted by Sandbar Palms residents over the past 3 weeks. Across from me sat Monica Larrell, the CPS investigator assigned to Maella's case. She hadn't said much since greeting me with a curt nod and clipboard. Her eyes, however, said plenty. She'd seen the footage, she'd read the reports, and now it was time to face the source. The door opened at 9:03 a.m. 2 security officers entered first. Then, in walked Colleen Mirth. She was wearing a navy skirt suit, pearl earrings, and that same curated poise I'd seen at every HOA meeting, shoulders pulled back, chin up, like posture alone would ward off consequence. But her steps were slower, less certain, and her eyes flicked toward me just once before moving away. The officers escorted her to the other side of the table. Monica took her seat and cleared her throat. "This is a voluntary interview," she said calmly. "You are here as part of a formal review into conduct affecting the welfare of minors at Sandbar Palms. You may decline to answer questions at any time. However, any answers given will be entered into the investigation report." Colleen nodded once. No words. Monica turned to me. "Mr. Vice, please submit your materials for the record." I slid the folder across the table. She opened it, reviewed the contents, then slid one of the USB drives into her laptop. A still frame appeared on the monitor. Mayella in her vest, just as Colleen's fingers clenched the straps. "Ms. Mirth," Monica said, turning the screen so she could see, "can you explain your actions in this footage?" Colleen's lips pressed together, but she didn't flinch. "The child was unsupervised," she said. "I intervened to prevent a potential drowning." "You are not certified in aquatic safety, is that correct?" "No." "Were you given express permission by the child's guardian to make physical contact?" "No." Monica clicked to the next clip. Another child, same location, a different day. The boy flinched away as Colleen leaned in, voice raised, fingers pointed. He looked no older than 4. "And this child?" Monica asked. I was instructing him on proper lane use. "Were his parents present?" Colleen hesitated. "I believe they were nearby." The third clip played. This time, the camera caught Colleen placing a hand on a child's shoulder and pushing him firmly toward the shallow end. Monica didn't ask anything. She just let it loop twice. Then she paused the video and folded her hands. "Ms. Mirth, are you aware that any physical contact with a minor by a non-guardian, especially involving force or restraint, without express consent, may qualify as endangerment under State Code 78.21? Colleen's voice wavered for the first time. "I was acting in accordance with community policy. There is no legal record of such a policy. The amendment you reference was never ratified, filed, or acknowledged by municipal oversight. In fact, we have substantial evidence that you forged language in multiple bulletins to give the illusion of authority you did not possess." She sat back in her chair. "The city has already placed Sandbar Palms under interim control. This office will now forward all documentation to the district attorney's office for review. Depending on their findings, formal charges may follow." Colleen stared at the monitor, her face pale now, hollow. "I was just trying to maintain order," she said. "No," Monica said quietly. "You were trying to control people, and you used children to do it." The room went still. I didn't speak. There was nothing left to say. Outside, I passed the officers as they escorted Colleen to a separate room for final processing. She didn't look at me this time. She looked down. And for the first time since this began, I believe she finally understood something. Power built on fear always ends the same way. It collapses in silence. The coral whale is framed now. It hangs in the new recreation center behind safety glass, right above a brass plate that reads, "For the children who were told to stay small and the community that refused." It was unveiled 2 weeks after Colleen's removal. The city's interim oversight team cleared the HOA of operational authority permanently. A new board was formed by public vote. Open, transparent, community-run. No fines without hearing, no contact allowed between any board official and a resident child without written parental consent. Every policy change now has to pass a 2/3 majority. But more than that, people talk now. At the pool, on the sidewalk, at the mailbox. The silence she built is gone. And Mayella swims again. She was nervous the first time. Her hands gripped the floaty too tight, and she scanned the water like Colleen's shadow might still be hiding there. But I sat poolside with a stopwatch and let her set the pace. She kicked off the edge after 3 minutes and swam to the middle on her own. When she reached the ladder, she turned back and grinned. "That's where I got strong," she said, pointing to the deep end. I didn't correct her. She wasn't wrong. We held a community gathering the next weekend, not a hearing, a celebration. Kids ran around the splash zone while parents talked openly about the past few months. The new HOA president, a young woman named Dana who used to avoid all meetings, spoke from the same podium Colleen once ruled with a whisper. "I don't want power," she said. "I want fairness. That's it. We get there by staying visible, loud, kind, and clear." I stood at the back with Mayella on my shoulders while she waved to everyone who walked by. Later that evening, I got one final envelope. This one from the city clerk. It contained a thank you note, a municipal commendation for whistleblower coordination, and a small certificate for outstanding civil leadership in a residential capacity. It felt strange to hold something that formal, but I knew who it really belonged to. I placed it in the same frame as the first photo I ever took of Maela at the pool. She was 2, in a polka dot suit, sitting on the edge of the shallow end, arms around the coral whale like it was her whole world. She's 5 now, and she walks past that photo every day without realizing how much power it holds. But I do. Because sometimes it doesn't take a courtroom or a headline to stop people like Colleen. Sometimes it just takes enough people saying, no more. So if you've ever stayed silent because you didn't want to cause trouble, or didn't think anyone would believe you, or because you thought maybe you were the problem, let this be your reminder. The second you speak up, someone else finds the courage to stand beside you. And that's how communities are reborn. If this story resonated with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe to the channel for more real HOA takedowns and community justice stories. You're not alone. Not anymore.